Now, my apologies to Sam and the worship leaders and that. I changed the title of my sermon this morning, so it's the problem when you've got to give a sermon and all the details when you haven't actually finished it yet. But anyway, it's certainly related to the Sabbath, no ifs or buts about that. But I've entitled it, Does It Really Matter? Let's put this so I can read it when I need to. Does the Sabbath really matter? Have we, as Adventists, been maybe banging on or barking up the wrong tree about the importance of the Sabbath? And so today, I want to look at different perspectives. I'm going to look at Jewish perspectives, going to look at Sunday Christian perspectives, and I use the term Sunday Christians as just a bit of a shorthand for Christians who go to church on Sunday. Okay, there's nothing beyond that. And of course, Seventh-day Adventist perspectives as well. Now, I'm not going to look at the Bible and all the proof texts about the Sabbath, okay? I think we know those, okay? Well, most here would know those texts about the Sabbath. So, I'm not disputing, is Saturday Sabbath or should we keep the Sabbath? That's not the issue. Does it really matter? Okay, that's what I'm looking at today. I'm looking at more of the role of the Sabbath in faith, belief and practice from these different perspectives and what we might be able to learn from some of the different perspectives that are out there about the Sabbath. So let's see if the Sabbath really matters or not. Now, when I preached on this, I think it was about 3 years ago, I talked about a man called Abraham Joshua Heschel, and he was a Polish-born American rabbi, okay, and one of the leading Jewish theologians and philosophers of the 20th century. Now, his major claim to fame was writing a book called The Sabbath, okay? So he wrote this book about the Sabbath, and he had some fairly interesting perspectives that he put forward in this book that he wrote. And one of the things, the issues that is sort of brought up is about buildings and church buildings. Are they sacred, or is it the time that makes the building sacred? Anyway, we've got quite a lot of video clips in this sermon today from different people. So we'll have a look, first of all, at his perspective, at least one of his perspectives about the Sabbath, which we probably heard of, but let's hear what has to say.
He would spark our imagination by describing Sabbath as a cathedral in time. That depiction comes from the acclaimed writer Abraham Joshua Heschel in his classic work, The Sabbath.
I think the emphasis is on the word time. That is, my father spoke about the extraordinary cathedrals built all over Europe by the church. Beautiful, beautiful buildings. Jews don't have that. We didn't build cathedrals, buildings. Instead, we built a cathedral out of time. Shabbat is our cathedral.
Now, time became sacred long before space became sacred. Like, for example, in the days of Noah, in the days of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, there was no holy place. No place was holy. Time was.
That was quite influential in Adventist thinking, Abraham Heschel, about the Sabbath being a cathedral in time, and his point about sacred places versus sacred time. I'm not going to go into it fully today about that, but we probably know that there tends to be a lot of discussion, or at least in the past, probably less now, about what you can do in church. Can you talk in church, or should we file out quietly and talk outside because it's sacred? Okay, or is it that the worship time makes it sacred, and that after that, we are still the people of God, and interacting with each other, and fellowship is still part of what it means to be a Christian and to keep the Sabbath holy. So anyway, that's just something to think about, but that was quite an interesting perspective, a cathedral in time. Nobody goes to visit fantastic Jewish synagogues, buildings, okay? But many people go to see cathedrals. Totally different way of thinking that the Sabbath's a cathedral in time, and that was the great monument to God is the time, not necessarily the place. So why did he write this book, The Sabbath? Okay, why would someone devote their time to writing a book about the Sabbath? Well, anyway, his daughter tells us why.
Why did my father write the Sabbath? Because he came to America and he saw the Jews had abandoned the Sabbath, and they didn't even realize what it was they had abandoned, what they had lost in their lives. The book was not particularly popular at the time. Keep in mind that most Jews in those days, so after World War II in America, most Jews assumed that Jewish religious observance was over. No one expected what we have today, which is an enormous flourishing of Orthodox Judaism.
So this was his reason for writing the book. World War II, that really had a huge impact on Jews. You cannot underestimate the effect of the Holocaust had on Jewish people. The vast majority of Jews today are non-believers in God. Okay, they might still do all of the Jewish things. Okay, in fact, many of them do. They see it as their culture and something worth preserving. But majority have given up on God, and because of the Holocaust and what happened there. And so, when Abraham Herschel comes to America and finds Jewish practice, especially of the Sabbath, disappearing or not even being there, he thought, wait, you guys don't know what you've lost. You don't know what you've lost in what you're doing, ignoring the Sabbath. And so he wrote this book about the Sabbath, and to help the Jews see, hey, have a look at this. And now, as she said, there's a great flourishing of Jewish belief and practice, especially in some parts of America and New York City. So he was sort of one of the triggers for people to relook at their Jewish beliefs, even if they, many of them don't believe in God. Still, the Sabbath was something important, and so he wrote this book about the Sabbath being a cathedral in time. More than that, though, there's a saying among the Jews, more than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. Okay. What do they mean by that? What do they mean by that? Well, anyway, the Orthodox Union had this on their website. They say, it's no exaggeration to say that the Jew has survived 2,000 years of persecution and humiliation, largely because he had the Sabbath. It was one factor that not only made him survive, but kept him alive, both spiritually and morally. Without the Sabbath, the Jew would have vanished. It has been said that as much as the Jew has kept Shabbat, so has Shabbat kept the Jew. So here, the Orthodox Union says Sabbath has played a huge role in keeping the Jews. Okay? Anyone met any Hittites or Moabites lately? Disappeared. Okay? The Jews didn't have their own country for roughly 2,000 years, yet survived as a people. And many Jews attribute that to the Sabbath, the fact that they had the Sabbath, and that weekly observance of Sabbath kept their faith alive through all of that time of not having any place of their country of their own or anything like that. They attribute it to the Sabbath. It continues, in a positive sense, the Sabbath is the focus of Jewish belief. Each week, the Jew spends a day reinforcing his belief in God. Now, Orthodox Jews don't fully spell the name, so I'm quoting it. That's why I've left it like that. As long as Jews keep the Sabbath, God remains an integral force in their lives. Their faith is like a rock, and nothing can shake it. All the waves of persecution and prejudice break before this rock of faith. With this belief, they not only survive, but flourish. Now, how many other beliefs do the Jews have? They have plenty of other beliefs. Yet for them, Sabbath is central to their identity, to their faith, to keeping their faith. It all hinges on the Sabbath. And it's interesting what one Jew has said about how Jews ask or how Jews find out if they're, what their level of belief is. Are they orthodox? Are they observant? Are they liberal? Are they something else in Judaism? Okay, they just have one question. This is the question they ask.
In traditional terms, people wouldn't say, are you orthodox or are you observant? When a traditional person wants to know if a person is observant, they say, are you a Shomer Shabbos Jew? That means, do you observe the Sabbath? That becomes the defining term of whether that person is trustworthy or observant in traditional terms. So it's a defining quality of what is that person is a Sabbath person.
So yeah, in Judaism, very interesting. The defining quality of your belief and your practice is Sabbath. Are you keeping the Sabbath or not? Okay, that shows many things about you in their mind, about your commitment, your character, and how much you observe Judaism. So quite interesting that even in Judaism, Sabbath is something that is very, very important. It goes on to say in this, on this article on the Orthodox Union, many of our leaders bewail the decline of Judaism, but this decline is only to be found where the Sabbath is neglected. Among the community of Sabbath observers, Judaism is the same living and vital force that it always was. Isn't that interesting? We have the same, many Christians and Adventists have the same complaint. What's going on? People aren't committed as they were before, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and they're saying the same thing happens in Judaism. Okay, but it also makes the point, the people who keep the Sabbath and observing the Sabbath, it's just as good as it always was. It's only those who are neglecting the Sabbath that, that we're seeing this decline in religious observance. So as I say, it's very interesting that of all the beliefs that the Jews have, and they have many of them, the Sabbath is their key one in terms of faith, belief, practice, and all of those things. So I found that quite interesting. Now, okay, that's Jews. That's the Jewish perspective. So I think we can say in Jewish perspective, the Sabbath matters. Okay, I think we can say that fairly confidently. The Sabbath matters a lot. It's not just some tacked on belief or whatever. It matters a lot. Okay, what about Sunday Christians? Okay, previously I've showed a clip from City Life Church there in Wanturna, just near an Eastlink entrance. There, as you can see, a very large church, Pentecostal, obviously a Sunday background. And one of the preachers there preached a very interesting sermon about the Sabbath. Okay, we could almost invite her here, except she said you can choose any day. But anyway, besides that, it was a pretty good sermon in terms of the theology and things like that. And this was one interesting thing that she had to say about the Sabbath.
Number one is lean into the Sabbath hunger. Lean into the Sabbath hunger. There is in each of us a yearning for this. There's not a person I talk to when you start talking about God calling us to rest, to this place of Sabbath, that does not react quite emotionally to that space. It's things like, I don't quite understand it, but it seems like when I hear about the Shabbat, I'm reconnected with a long-lost memory. We have forgotten the Sabbath, forgotten that it's part of our spiritual DNA. We have become the people chasing the wind and suffering from severe spiritual amnesia. You know, it's like when you start talking about Shabbat, this nostalgic feelings arises in the people of God.
Quite an interesting perspective there. You know, as a Sunday Christian saying, hey, we've forgotten about the Sabbath. It's in our DNA. Now, our DNA, now I'm no scientist, okay, but DNA is really what makes us up, you know, in the genes and the DNA. And she was saying there, Sabbath is in our DNA. And as Christians, as Sunday Christians, we've forgotten about that to our detriment. It was very interesting what the term she used. She said, we've become a people chasing the wind and suffering from severe spiritual amnesia. Okay? That was pretty similar to what Joshua Heschel said about the Jews, that they had forgotten. You know, they'd forgotten something important and he had to bring them back. Now, the other thing that she said was about people chasing the wind. Okay, where's that come from? People chasing the wind. It comes from the book of Ecclesiastes. It's mentioned a few times, chasing after the wind. Okay, in Ecclesiastes 1:14, it says, I've seen everything under the sun. Everything is meaningless, chasing after the wind. Okay, it's an expression that means futility. Okay, futility, meaninglessness. Okay, that's the expression she used about describing when we forget about Sabbath. Okay, everything is futile, meaningless. Okay, this is a Christian talking. Okay, so this is someone who follows Christ. We would expect people to say, if you don't follow Christ, your life is meaningless, your life is futile. Okay, and that's true. But she's talking about Christians who don't keep the Sabbath. They've got it's futile what they are doing. It's meaningless what they are doing. So I don't know what the reaction of the congregation was to that particular sermon. But yeah, she used very, very strong words to describe Christians, including her own congregation, who have forgotten about the Sabbath. You know, we're meaningless. It's futile what is going on or what we are doing without the Sabbath. So yeah, as I say, quite a good sermon in many respects, not fully, but in many respects. Okay, so we've seen a Jewish perspective. The Sabbath matters. Okay, seen at least one Sunday perspective. Sabbath matters, really matters to Christians and to faith and practice and belief. Okay, interesting what Ellen White had to say on this topic as well. I was shown that if the true Sabbath had always been kept, there would never have been an infidel or an atheist. The observance of the Sabbath would have preserved the world from idolatry. The fourth commandment has been trampled upon. Therefore, we are called upon to repair the breach in the law and plead for the downtrodden Sabbath. Okay, that first part, quite interesting. I've shown if the true Sabbath had always been kept, there would never have been an infidel or atheist. The observance of the Sabbath would have preserved the world from idolatry. So isn't it interesting that all these testimonies about the Sabbath, okay, telling the importance of it and how important it is for our faith and our life as Christians or Jews or whatever, whether you're a Jew, whether you're a Sunday worship, go to church on Sunday, or an Adventist, the Sabbath seems to be extremely important, belief and practice. I've noticed when Adventists are sort of on the way out, for want of a better word, of leaving the Sabbath, doesn't really start with drinking alcohol or eating pork or shellfish or whatever. It tends to be the Sabbath that is the first thing to go, okay? Starting to be a bit lax about the Sabbath. That's generally the path out of the church, okay? For many Adventists, okay? It sort of begins and ends with Sabbath keeping. And so we've seen that even in our own church as well, that when Sabbath becomes less important, it's sort of that person is on the way out, or on a track to leave the church. So even in our own church, the Sabbath is just something that is, it's different to every other belief that we have in terms of the impact on our faith. Okay, it's not some optional extra or anything like that. Okay, now looked at these various testimonies. Now, got to give you a warning. Next section, US politics. Okay. Now, I know you're thinking, Paul, we have had enough of US politics up to here. Why are you bringing it up for in church, and why are you bringing it up on the topic of the Sabbath? Well, anyway, hang in there. Okay, there's an organisation called the Heritage Foundation, and they released a book, as you can see, a pretty big book, called Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. Okay, maybe you've heard of Project 2025. Okay, and basically, well, let's read it from their website. Project 2025 is a historic movement brought together by over 100 respected organisations from across the conservative movement to take down the deep state and return the government to the people. Its Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise, okay, that's that book, published in April 2023, is a product of more than 400 scholars and policy experts from around the country. The book offers a menu of policy suggestions to meet our country's deepest challenges and put America back on track, okay, including, so these are the sort of the areas that they're looking at. Okay, secure the border, finish building the wall and deport illegal aliens. De-weaponise the federal government by increasing accountability and oversight of the FBI and DOJ, Department of Justice. Okay. Unleash American energy production to reduce energy prices. Cut the growth of government spending to reduce inflation. Make federal bureaucrats more accountable to the democratically elected President and Congress. Improve education by moving control and funding of education from DC bureaucrats directly to parents and state and local governments. Okay, so you sort of get the idea, okay? Make America great again, okay, MAGA. Now, this is not done by Donald Trump, okay? That would be wrong to say that, okay? This is the wish list of the Heritage Foundations and conservative organisations for Donald Trump, what they would like him to do. Okay, it's their wish list. And there is quite a bit of crossover between people in Donald Trump's camp and this Project 2025. Okay, what has this got to do with Sabbath? Okay, well, anyway, this book is just over 900 pages long. Okay, so if you're having difficulty falling asleep, have I got a deal for you? It's on the internet, you can get it for free. Okay, it's freely available. So what's this have to do with the Sabbath? Well, tucked away on page 589, okay, 589. Ban biological males from competing in women's sport. That's another thing that they want to do. Okay, so that's their wish list. Page 589, Sabbath rest. God ordained the Sabbath as a day of rest, and until very recently, the Judeo-Christian tradition sought to honour that mandate by moral and regulation of work on that date. Moreover, a shared day off makes it possible for families and communities to enjoy time off together, rather than as atomised individuals, and provides a healthier cadence of life for everyone. Unfortunately, that communal day of rest has eroded under the pressures of consumerism and secularism, especially for low-income earners. So very interesting that this organisation that wants to do all sorts of things in their 900-page book includes a section on the Sabbath, okay, saying that it's a day of rest. It's part of our Judeo-Christian tradition to honour that day. Okay, this is part of their, as I say, it's freely available on the internet. It's not something hidden away or anything like that. Okay, but yeah, it's a shared day off that allows families and communities to enjoy time off together, which is a good thing. Okay, it's a good thing for having a common day off. Okay, No, we could agree with that. They also say communal day eroded under the pressure of consumerism and secularism. Now they've certainly identified, what has done that, what has eroded people's, keeping of the Sabbath or Sunday. And this, of course, was Sunday. Okay, but it is wrong to blame that, because Jews and Seventh-day Adventists, we keep the Sabbath, okay? We've resisted those forces. So if Christians wanted to, they could also resist those forces themselves and have Sunday as their Sabbath day, okay? It's not the right day, but I'm just saying, can't blame these things, okay? People make their own choices, okay? We all face the pressure as Christians. So what's the answer? What's the answer? Okay, again on page 499, Congress should encourage communal rest by amending the Fair Labour Standards Act to require that workers be paid time and a half for hours worked on the Sabbath. That day would default to Sunday, except for employers with a sincere religious observance of a Sabbath at a different time, e.g. Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. The obligation would transfer to that period instead. Houses of worship, to the limited extent they have FLSA covered employees, and employers legally required to operate around the clock, such as hospitals and first responders, would be exempt. So would workers otherwise exempt from overtime. So what they're saying is, okay, Congress should pass a law to discourage working on Sabbath, okay, or Sunday, or whatever people want, by time and a half, okay? Don't tell Americans it's actually double time in Australia, but anyway, it's regular time in America, and so they're saying to get the Sabbath holy, or to get more people to have it off, penalise employers by having to pay more for people to work on Sabbath or on Sunday or whatever it is. So it does have that protection that if it's Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, okay, that's okay as well. But it's just interesting that this group of conservatives wants to do some sort of enforcing, not quite enforcing, but at least treat Sunday differently, as part of this plan of making America great again with this mandate for leadership. Now, whether Trump does it or not, it's anybody's guess, and that could change within an hour with himself. But anyway, this is what they wanted. Conservatives saw that honouring the Sabbath was part of making America great again and going back to the Judeo-religious tradition. Now, there's one more thing, but look, we probably won't go into that. But anyway, you can read it in the book. It's not hidden there online. Just go to Project 2025. Guys, go to Mark chapter 2, 23 to 24. Oh, 23 to 24, sorry. Mark chapter 2, 23 to 24. Okay, this is the background. Second chapter of Mark. One Sabbath day, as Jesus was walking through some grain fields, his disciples began breaking off heads of grain to eat. But the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they breaking the law by harvesting grain on the Sabbath?" Okay, so that's what was happening. Okay, we'll jump down to 27 and 28. Then Jesus said, "The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of the people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath." Now, of course, we know this text, but there's an interesting, got an interesting clip about what a Catholic priest had to say about, especially verse 27 and 28.
But when Jesus says in regard to himself that the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, that's one of the most extraordinary claims he ever makes about himself. You can't say anything higher than that. In other words, he's saying, I'm not just one more prophet among many. I'm the Creator God.
I hadn't really thought of that before, but when Jesus said he was Lord of the Sabbath, it was the highest claim he could make. Very interesting. Now you're saying, hey, I'm the Creator God, because of the Creator God who instituted the Sabbath. So when Jesus said, I'm Lord of the Sabbath, that was pretty high up of what he was saying about himself. And he said many things about himself, but that was one of the big ones to do that. Now, as you saw, he was a Catholic bishop named Robert Barron, and he heads up a ministry called Word on Fire. What I found interesting is he puts a high value on Jesus saying he's Lord of the Sabbath, saying he's the Creator, okay? Yet, his church, the Catholic Church, changed the date from Saturday to Sunday, putting themselves above Jesus, okay? Because Jesus is Creator, he's the Lord of the Sabbath, and yet, his church, the Catholic Church, took a position higher than that by transferring from Saturday to Sunday. Now, they didn't change the Sabbath because the Sabbath is still the same, okay? But they changed many Christians honouring, instead of Saturday Sabbath, to Sunday. So I found it very interesting that he had a high view of Jesus as Lord of the Sabbath, yet he was part of a church that actually changed it, where many Christians worship on Sunday. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Okay, just like to just look at a few things about enhanced Sabbath keeping and understanding. And one of them is first one I'm going to show is Richard Rice, who's one of our Adventist theologians, and he talks about the influence of Abraham Heschel had, the Jew who talked about the cathedral in time and his perspectives and his influence on Adventism. Let's have a look.
Well, I would attribute to Heschel's influence a transition in the thinking of many Adventists from Sabbath keeping to the Sabbath experience. I think Heschel's contribution to our thinking on the Sabbath was to enhance the sense that this is a day to live life at its fullest.
Okay. Probably, Adventists of a certain age, unfortunately my age, and maybe a bit older, we probably grew up with a little bit of a legalistic understanding of the Sabbath that we're probably seen a little bit different now. And that was at least partly because of the influence of Heschel and a few others, that we're supposed to experience the Sabbath, not just keep the Sabbath. And so that was quite a difference there. Yeah, and I must admit, during lockdown, I had a totally different Sabbath experience that I've tried to keep a bit. Before, my Sabbaths were way too rushed, and I didn't have much time at all to do much. I had meetings and blah, blah, blah. But after lockdown, I changed it. No more meetings. I just spend time with church people, family, and things like that to really experience the Sabbath. So it was a real change for myself. Okay, as we saw, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, not to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So there's some speakers who talk about this part and about how Jesus did a lot of healings on the Sabbath and why. Why did he seem to really get up the noses of the religious leaders in regards to the Sabbath? Let's have a look at it.
When Jesus comes, he makes a big deal of the Sabbath, and he seems to have a preference for healing on the Sabbath, to deliver on the divine commitment, not divine commandment as maybe his critics think about the Sabbath, but as divine commitment. It's like he knows that he is inside a Sabbath story.
It's the perfect day because the miracles of Jesus are they're not magic tricks. Watch me do something amazing. What he does is he heals people. He restores creation. And so it's altogether appropriate that he would do that work precisely on the Sabbath.
So rather than saying Jesus abolishes the Sabbath and all of the teachings of the Sabbath, I say what Jesus is doing in his ministries is helping us understand What would a Sabbath way of being look like when it encounters trouble, pain, suffering?
Okay, again, some interesting perspectives there. Only the first one was an Adventist. The other two, the last two people were not Adventists. But yeah, a day of restoration, a day of healing. And so that's why Jesus did a lot of it on the Sabbath. So does the Sabbath really matter? Doesn't matter. Well, it seems like according to Jews, people go to church on Sundays, and of course Adventists, it does matter. It matters a lot. Now, want to make it clear, nobody is saved by Sabbath keeping, okay? We know that, okay? Even though I've talked a lot about the Sabbath, obviously, we're not saved by it, okay? No one is saved by Sabbath keeping. However, you've got to watch out for that word, don't you? The Sabbath seems to have a role in keeping us saved, because without the Sabbath, it seems like we wouldn't have that saving faith. Now, once we start neglecting or whatever the Sabbath, we lose that saving faith. So we are not saved by the Sabbath. We are saved by faith in Jesus, absolutely. And the Sabbath seems to have a really important role in keeping us saved, in keeping our relationship with Jesus. It does seem to play a bigger role. Okay, the Project 2025, they're not saying we've got to get people believing in the second coming again. That's what's missing in America. Okay, none of that. No, the Sabbath. The Sabbath is what the key is that they see. It seems like the Jews, Adventists, of course, Christians on Sunday, you know, the last guy there, Duke University, he's not an Adventist, yet seeing the importance of the Sabbath. So whether we're a Jew, Sunday Christian, Seventh-day Adventist, the Sabbath plays a huge role in our salvation, even though that's not what saves us, okay? It just has this outsized role compared to any other belief or teaching. I'd like to close with a video. How many of you have got the YouVersion Bible app on your phone? YouVersion, okay, rightio, at least one. It's called the YouVersion. Anyway, they have a verse of the day, and I start off the morning with that. And they have a verse of the day and then a short video about the verse of the day. Well, anyway, they had a series on Sabbath. I thought, oh, that's going to be interesting because the Bible app is, I think it was created by one of the churches, a Sunday church. But anyway, they had four days in a row about the Sabbath. And so I'm just going to share one of them. It's by a man by the name of John Mark Comer. And he had 4 videos about some various texts about the Sabbath. So we'll just close with this. At the very end of this video, it really resonated with me about one of the understandings of the Sabbath.
Desire is like the engine of our life. It's the drive to get out of bed in the morning and live. But when you pay close attention to the inner dynamics of the heart, you realize desire is one of those things that is never, ever satisfied. We work more than ever before, we have more than ever before, and we're still not happy. And it's so easy to just get sucked into the culture, to feel like you just have to work those extra hours to get ahead, like you have to reach a certain standard of living, you have to own this or that, you have to participate in this or that. It's so easy just to say, well, that's just how it is. Is there a way to fight against the cancerous restlessness of the human heart and the age to which we belong? Yes, Sabbath. The culture all around you is a Sabbathless, rhythmless, hollow out your soul and suck you dry culture. Sabbath is a weekly reminder you're not a slave anymore. You don't have to produce or perform or purchase your way into love. You don't need more things or more experiences or more relationships because you have God. You don't need to hold your life together in fear for your future because God is your good shepherd. To Sabbath well will require intentionality, preparation, and a resolute determination to go against the flow of the cultural tide, to live differently, This is not easy. You are standing against what the Apostle Paul calls the principalities and powers. We have to resist the internal dynamics of restlessness in our own fallen heart: greed, envy, jealousy, discontentment, anxiety, a controlling spirit, addiction. When you practice Sabbath, you are going to feel resistance. But Sabbath rest is your secret weapon in the war against the powers and the principalities of our age. It's an entire day where you say, I have enough.
I really like that perspective at the end. I have enough. I have enough. In God, in Jesus, I have enough. And Sabbath is my weekly reminder we have enough.